what's your name and all that stuff?
My name is Preach Jacobs. I am a hip hop artist, a writer, business owner. I've been a columnist for the Free Times with a column called Fight the Power for the past few years. I am now also doing work for a media company called The Arena. I have a podcast on there called Worthy Cause Podcast. I need to get you on. And I do some column work for them as well. I've been doing hip hop for a while. I have an album that's out now called Francis, named after my grandmother. We had the new shipment of vinyl that just came back in. It won one of the top albums in South Carolina last year. And hopefully, when is this going to come out, this interview?
In the next couple weeks, yeah.
All right, well, cool. I won Best Hip Hop Artist for 2024 and 2023, so I'm excited about that for the Free Times Best of Columbia. And that's always awesome to me, not because I win it, but because I never campaigned for it.
Right.
Like,
right.
I'm never on my page like, vote for me, you know. So it's really cool for that to kind of happen organically. And I am 1/3 owner of Soul House Art Gallery in the Vista, very, very hyper-local gallery where we want to amplify local artists, and we will have our 1-year anniversary this November.
So you're not doing much then?
Nah, not at
all. That's good. You know, I mean, it's good to slow down a little bit, you know, and take a breath and not be involved in too many things, you know.
And I also DJ, and that's the other thing that's what kills you is that, you know, the pandemic was one of those things where it was an equalizer, right? So if you're an artist, regardless if you regularly perform in front of 20,000 people or if you perform with 50 people at a coffee shop, everybody was at home with the acoustic guitars, right? Mm-hmm. And so when the pandemic was over, there became this overcorrection with artists that just booked the hell out of themselves, right?
Yeah.
It's like I'm never telling anybody no for anything.
Right.
I'm gonna take advantage of everything because I don't know if this is gonna happen again. And that's still in my mind. And I hit a wall sometimes where I'm like, why did I book a gig that's going to be a Thursday, a Friday, and a Saturday, and a Sunday? Like, I'm 40. I'm not in my 20s anymore, right? And so,
sure.
And so, like, that's something that I have to kind of learn to be better about. So
yeah, and I'll tell you, I had the same issue, and I am the one. So I'm a musician in bands, mm-hmm. right? And I am the one nerd in the group that loves practice, and I want to play all the time.
You want to film all the rehearsals,
and I want to take new songs. Yeah. Get me on that thing. Let's go do that thing, right? Mm-hmm. And because I had, I don't know, 15 years or so where I didn't play at all, mm-hmm. right? I was just building the business. I was working all the time, and you know, the first time I performed in public, after that long hiatus was March of 2020. Oh, wow. the week before everything shut down, we had the CMA Gala at the Museum of Art, and wow. I played with a band at the CMA Gala. And it was amazing. And I was like, oh, my God, I got to do this again. This is so great. And then
4 years later,
the world goes, you know. And so and coming out of that, any opportunity I had to play, you know, anytime somebody asked me, anytime I had a hint that any of my friends were putting a project together or anything, I'm like, can I get on that? Y'all need this? And can I, you know, carry your boxes, sir? You know, and all that stuff. And, but that's, I still am loving it. I do remember though, the last time I was doing it regularly, which would have been probably 2010 or 9 or 10, something like that. I got to that every weekend thing, or you know, and you get to where like, ugh, like
weekend warrior, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I got to carry this amp out to the car again, and you know,
I'm gonna tell you this. This is the small distinction that I have about being an artist, and I tell people, I don't want to be so famous that I can't go to Target anymore. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I just want to be famous enough that when I have a show, I don't have to bring my equipment, right? Like, right. I saw Questlove at the Brooklyn Bowl.
Right.
In Brooklyn, New York. He did this thing called Bowl Train, where he got all the rights to all these Soul Train records or wow. Soul Train footage. And so he would be DJing and have all this footage of these old Soul Train videos wow. playing in the background. And I saw him when he was DJing. When he got done DJing, he took his 2 records off the platters, which was the controlled vinyl, put them back in his sleeves, and walks out the door. There's like a Mercedes waiting for him, gets in the car and drives off. And I'm like, he didn't have to unpack something. He didn't have to plug anything.
He is, however, probably too famous to go to Target.
Yes, probably
right?
so.
Now, if he were to shave his head down, trim
You
down,
have no clue. Yeah,
if he would trim down, nobody would know who
turn
he
into
was.
Quest-like.
Yeah, he would not be quite as recognizable.
And I'll be honest with you, me being older and more like, I guess I don't want to say the word bitter. I'm just old. I would turn down a gig if it's inconvenient.
Yeah.
Right? Where listen, guys, if y'all are booking DJs, please just make sure we have a place to park. Like, so it'll be I remember I was doing something in the Vista years ago, and the money wasn't great, and it was like the traffic was really bad, and I couldn't find a park to unpack all my shit. And then it started raining.
Yep.
And I'm just like, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And so you learn those lines that you set for yourself when you go through them. And I would say this: it's cool to be able to tell people no, because the worst part about being an artist, and you've probably gone through this, where you feel like you have to take every opportunity because you're scared that the next one isn't going to come.
Well, and I don't, it's so funny. I just did a video about this the other day. I don't consider myself an artist because I don't write. I've gotten to a point where I don't really write.
So
I did a long time.
What do you call yourself?
I'm a musician. I'm a technician. I'm like a person you hire to build a beautiful cabinet.
Okay.
Like it's not art. It's useful, right?
That's absolutely art.
Well, I mean,
Absolutely.
it's I look at art, and this is an interesting conversation since you own an art gallery. In my experience of art, I have always considered art to be the thing that you make for yourself, right? So if you think about it, like if I'm, and I don't want to demean any of the current pop artists, but let's say I'm the Backstreet Boys. I'm not necessarily making my art for me, right? I'm hired by a guy to make music that it's going to sell. And that's more of a craft than an art, right? And they're very good at it, right? There's probably was no one better in the world than the Backstreet Boys when they came out at doing what they were doing, right? I'm not sure how much I would call them artists, other than the idea that they, created something creative, but they didn't really do it for themselves as much as they did it because they were picked by someone to make it for someone else.
Well,
and so
I guess that's where it gets kind of murky, right? Because nostalgia is a bitch, right? Because it'll be something that, I have a story tied to this later, but like you look at a song like Vanilla Ice Ice Baby as a hip hop fan,
Sure.
I hated it.
Sure.
But in the right setting, and I was DJing for a 30-year high school reunion recently, and you play it
Where it was a hit,
yeah,
and they didn't care.
Yeah.
They weren't in the circle.
Well, the thing about it too is that me playing it recently, it kind of made me smile a little bit, even though I hated the record, right? So I think art becomes a sliding scale over time, right?
Sure.
So even if it was intended to be, and I think what you're talking about is the difference between the approach of like a Lamborghini versus Henry Ford creating the assembly line.
Yeah,
right.
Of course.
Where Henry Ford is like, look, all you got to do is your one thing, and this car is going to come together.
And he said you can have it in any color you want as long as it's black.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, he said some other crazy shit
because it was the easy thing to do, right?
Absolutely.
If you paint it black, then you just get the one color over and over again. You don't have to. And I love that kind of stuff. I mean, that is certainly not demeaning craft, right? Craft is. I mean, you think about movies, right? Movies are attributed to a director, a producer, a set of actors, even a composer, right? But there are hundreds of craftspeople that have to come together to make this thing work.
The boom mic guy,
oh my goodness!
Yeah.
And if you don't hold it right, you don't get the good audio, and you got to go back and do ADR at the end.
All right, you ever seen Black Dynamite?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
You remember that part in the movie when he stands up and the boom mic hits him on the head? Do you know what that references to?
No.
So I have like a place in my heart for blaxploitation movies.
Okay.
Not because they were good.
Right.
Like a lot of them are really terrible. The soundtracks were amazing. The Shaft soundtrack is amazing. Superfly is amazing. But the movies were really, really bad. And there's I have a warm spot in my heart for them because you saw a bunch of people trying to figure shit out. where you didn't have a lot of black guys in the guild as actors or producer guild or what the fuck is a boom mic. Anyways, so if you watch the movie The Mac, there's a scene where the main character is standing up in his office and he's talking all this shit to this person, and the boom mic is in the shot. Right, and it was one of those things where it was this low budget film.
Yeah,
we don't have the money to reshoot this.
Yeah,
so they kept it in there,
and they don't notice until too late.
But the audience probably didn't care because they're like, "Look, man, I'm happy to see myself on the screen."
That's right.
Right. So so we gonna let this shit slide. Right.
Yeah.
So
it's
Black
amazing.
Dynamite, that part where he stands up and the boom mic hits his head, that was like paying homage to that.
Homage to the Mac.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so there's a part of me that's just like, certain shit can be seen as whack or terrible, but if it has if it resonates with you in a certain way, that's kind of all that matters. And I had to get over that, where there was a lot of hip hop that I didn't like.
Right.
Like, the early 2000s, a lot of the pop stuff, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to hear no Nelly. I don't want to hear this. And then you get older and like you realize, oh, I don't want to listen to conscious hip hop in the strip club, right?
Like,
maybe there's
it's
a
out
place,
of context.
Maybe there's a place for some of this music that I usually don't listen to, right? And so I don't know. I think over time you start to kind of like learn that. But my question for you, when I was growing up, the film that everyone always talked about as being kind of like, the holy grail of films to learn how to shoot and this and that, it was always Citizen Kane. Is that still the answer for you, or has that shifted over time?
So okay. So Citizen Kane is a touch point for a lot of filmmakers, because what ends up happening is you go, you can't saddle me with what was great when you were coming up, right? So Citizen Kane has become, I think, in a lot of ways, like Pulp Fiction. Like Pulp Fiction has become, like, from my kind of, I don't even know what my generation is, but let's say 90s. If your kind of heyday was the 90s, you look at films like Pulp Fiction. You look at films that happened around that time. Things like David Fincher, like Seven or Fight Club. But also, you look at Scorsese, and you look at Goodfellas, and you look at Taxi Driver, and those movies like that. They're certainly much more our speed than what Citizen Kane is. If you tried to watch Citizen Kane, it's almost unwatchable because it's so much Orson Welles' vision of something that made a lot more sense in the context of the 40s that it doesn't make a lot of sense now. As
I tell you what, it's difficult for people to do this, but I have an ability that I think I have to work at to watch things in that context, right? So, like, I'll give you an example. There was when I used to work at Sounds Familiar, good friend of mine, Chuck, was the manager there, and he was like maybe about 15 years older than me. So the stuff that was the movies that he absolutely loved in high school, he would put me onto. I would watch them. I'm like, this isn't very good. But I had to put in perspective of like, oh, when this shit came out, Fast Times at Ridgemont High or something like that, that was like probably a game changer when it came out.
Revolutionary.
Right? Yeah. But me watching it when I saw it, if I don't understand the context, hip hop is the same way, right? It's like you'll listen to, a lot of these old records that were made with like really minimal beat machines, and you're like, this doesn't sound very sophisticated. But if you put it in the context of like, the first time the Message came out, that blew my mind. So I said that to say, when I watched Citizen Kane, I probably watched it like a few years ago, or probably during the pandemic, where I'm just going through rewatching it. And I quote something from Citizen Kane quite often.
Okay.
And I think this quote comes up more often now, where I think it was the butler that said, he was speaking about how the main character became so incredibly wealthy. Yeah. And he said, getting rich is really easy if that's all you want out of life. I'm kind of paraphrasing it.
Yeah.
But I love using that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, if you just want to be rich, you can do that. If you don't give a fuck about how you get there, you don't care about family, you don't care about this, then you can get to this point.
Step over whoever it takes to get there. Yeah.
So in that regard, when I watch certain movies like that, I watch them for the social currency.
Yeah.
Like certain stuff, like I feel like at some point I need to watch the Barbie movie because there's going to be so many references in there
Now,
that I'm not going to get. I need to watch it, you know?
what I love is that there are things that are happening in movies still. Most are still not great, right?
Like what are you thinking?
Well, like, okay, so a movie like Oppenheimer as an example, okay? Christopher Nolan says, okay, I'm going to make this very specific historical drama about the relationships of these people and set it in the context of this big bomb blowing up. I'm going to use all practical effects. I'm not going to do any CGI, and it's all going to be real shallow. So like everything that you see is going to be, controlled focus. What they did in Oppenheimer, now granted it's 3 hours long. It's a tough movie to get through in one sit. But you can see the sort of brilliance and the craft that Nolan puts into it, the art that all of the rest of the people put into it. The Barbie movie is a complete opposite thing, right? It's easy to digest. There's a very clear message. You get it the first minute you see it. You love it or you love it or you hate it, depending on whatever. But you can also tell it's made extraordinarily well. What's interesting is you've got these outlets now, Netflix and Amazon Prime and these things where the movies that are questionable, that are marginal, go to live, right? And you just consume them if you want to. You don't have to pay anything extra. I was telling somebody the other day I just watched Rebel Moon. Have you seen Rebel Moon? No. Zack Snyder's. Zack Snyder's original property. So he wrote it came up with the idea.
So it'll be a lot of slow motion.
A lot of slow motion. Oh my God. The movie's 2.5 hours long because of all the slow motion. It would be like an hour and 20 minutes if they took out all the slow motion. But I think it's cool that with the amount of stuff that's coming out, great TV right now. Like the TV has risen to the point of films, right? As you look at
when do you think that shift happened? Because in my mind, it hit me when you saw something like True Detective.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And my theory was these are just one-off seasons. So it was easier to get these guys in here. But did that shift happen before that? Like
I think so. I think probably a show like The Sopranos or a show like 6 Feet Under, those HBO shows from the early 2000s or late 90s. What happened with it is that the performances went way up, the budgets and all that stuff went way up. The conceptualizing, you got to think about a show like Lost, right? Went on ABC or one of the networks, I think it was ABC, went on one of the networks, and they had 6 seasons. They had to have planned out the ending at the beginning over 6 seasons. Yeah. And what's insane about all of that is that when those episodes came out, they had time to see how people reacted to the season or to the episode or to the storyline and all that kind of stuff, and they didn't change it. And that's very much what happens with a movie, right? When you're presented a 2.5 hour movie, they don't ever change it based on what's popular or what's not. TV shows would drift based on the season and based on everything else, and that type of thing doesn't happen as much anymore. But there's just not hardly any bad television right now, except for True Detective. The newer season of True Detective is not great.
I mean, honest with you, man. Between the second season of True Detective was awful with Vince Vaughn. I think it just got way left field.
Yeah.
The latest season I wasn't a huge fan of.
Right.
But it wasn't the original writer. It was just different people.
Right.
I'm going to tell you what they should have done. There was a show called, I forgot what it was called, but it was John Turturro was in it. And the young kid that played in the movie, he was nominated for an Oscar for it, where he was a drummer that was losing his hearing.
Oh yeah, Miles Teller.
It wasn't Miles Teller.
Oh, okay.
It was a movie where he was like a metal drummer. And he was losing his hearing.
It was called Heavy Metal, I think.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
He played in this show.
Or The Sound of Metal or something like that. Yeah.
He was in this show where he was falsely accused of a murder, and John Turturro was this like public defender.
Okay.
Who was real quirky. It was called like The Night Of or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And it was like 8 episodes, really, really great. And I was like, that should have been a True Detective season.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I think
because True Detective, that first season goes to show what happens when an artist has a singular vision, and lets people get around that artist to help the artist realize that singular vision.
Yeah.
If it had not been Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson, if those two hadn't been the stars, the chemistry wouldn't have been there. You can see that in the second season.
Yeah,
the
second season became this thing where everyone knew it was successful. Now we want to jump into it, which I would comparatively bring up. The Leftovers. Did you ever watch that?
No, I don't think so.
So The Leftovers, I forgot the people that did it, but it was a show. The premise of the show is basically one day, 1/3 of the population just disappeared.
Okay.
And so when the main character is like this cop in this small town,
right,
dealing with all these things, right? So you got people that disappear that you got to deal with. Then it becomes like this cult of people that stop speaking, and they do all these things to kind of remind people about the people that disappeared. Anyways, the show was really, really great, really well done. But the directors of the show, it was such a niche show that they were afraid that HBO was going to cancel it at the end of every season. So at the end of every season, they had it done
like final.
If they're going to cancel it. So it lasted 3 seasons.
Right.
They nailed the dismount with the 3rd season, and the showrunners for that did the Watchmen.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And when I saw the Watchmen, or saw Watchmen, because they're going to be mad if I say the Watchmen. When I saw Watchmen, I was really, really impressed with it. And when it ended, I was afraid, kind of like True Detective. I was like,
don't do it again.
They're gonna fuck it up. They're gonna fuck it up. And by golly, everybody that worked on the show was just like, nah, we're gonna leave it as is. And HBO was gonna throw them a pile of money. And I was like, nah, this has ended perfectly.
Yeah.
If we try to do anything else with this, we're gonna ruin it. And so that was like a rare moment. It was a kind of like a victory for the creatives.
Yeah.
Because HBO wanted them to do it. HBO would have given them whatever they wanted, you know?
Yeah.
Because HBO, one of my biggest disappointments, and I go back to this show a lot because it's the 20th anniversary, Deadwood was one of my favorite shows. And do you know why it was canceled after the 3rd season? So I think it was David Chase. Deadwood was one of those critically acclaimed shows. Ian McShane was fantastic. Even though when I watch it now, I'm really not a fan of how Timothy Olyphant played his character because he was just angry all the time. And that's why I think like when he started doing Justified, he kind of chilled out. Like, like be a cool cowboy.
Got it better.
Like, right?
Yeah.
So what ended up happening with Deadwood, it was a period show. It cost so much. So David Chase is just like, you know what? I'm going to stop doing Deadwood and do this show called John from Cincinnati. Was supposed to be this guy who had like these like superpowers, whatever. The show tested horribly. Everyone hated it. It lasted 1 season. And then everybody that was on Deadwood went to go do other things. And so when they tried to circle back around to do the Deadwood movie, I really didn't like it. It really felt like the last episode of Seinfeld. Like it was just, it was like, all right, you're trying to give me closure, but But
well, what they did on the last episode of Seinfeld is that, and this hit me. I remember watching that in a crowded park on a giant screen. There was like hundreds of people in Augusta.
Okay,
there was hundreds of people there, and we all gathered to watch the last episode of Seinfeld. And the point of the last episode was to make sure that we all knew that the point was that these were all terrible people.
Yeah.
Right. And I did not hit me until that episode, and I went, "Good Lord, they are kind of terrible people." Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting ending. All right, I want to take this a different direction. There are probably someone watching or listening that's thinking to themselves, "Okay, I can't make a living as a creative. I've got to go. I got to go do accounting, or I've got to go do what I went to college for." What'd you go to college for? Did you go to college?
Never finished.
Never finished.
Because I was an artist. I had an opportunity to tour the world. I had an opportunity to tour Japan and tour London.
Yeah.
Got signed to a label in London, and then you get to the point where you're basically like, I'll come back to that. And then and at some point you're in it. But I tell you this, what I've learned over the years, because that's always been kind of this insecurity that I've always had, where your dad angry at you is not the same as your dad disappointed in you. And this one day my dad said to me one time, "You know what, son? Son, I thought you'd be like the president of the United States or something." Now that's probably more of an insult. But at the time that he said it, right? The time he said it, it was just like, dude, you had all this amazing, great potential. And that was a lot of therapy that you had to go through to get through that, because Here's my theory, and I've talked about this before, and we'll get to the making a living thing in a second. Is that
I'm gonna ask the question again because I want to make sure that I get to the right thing. Go continue your story.
well, my thing is this about being an artist. The difficulty about being an artist in America specifically is when I think of great actors, there was this comedian that had this joke. He was talking about like the first time you find out that Idris Elba is from London, you're like, fuck with the black community. It was like, really? You know, it's like, I thought he was from Baltimore. And
Right.
he's like, I'm going to eat a bowl of beans, you know?
Yeah.
And you realize, well, all these great actors are from London. It's because culturally, if I was a British kid and told my parents I was going to be an actor, they would respect that as much as me telling them I'm going to be a doctor or a lawyer, right? Here, there's not that,
Right.
right? So there's already this stigma that you have, right? Then add on to me coming from country ass black parents that are from the rural South that they think it's in their best interest to be like, look, I've never seen a personal artist that's successful, so we're going to steer you clear of that. And then when you're trying to aim towards being the artist, you're really going against the current, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of times community equity, social equity is a little bit better here in Columbia about valuing artists, but that's always a difficult task to do is to, you know, when the pandemic happened, all of a sudden I was feeling very valuable as a DJ. You know, people were paying me to do mixes for them because somehow, some way now, they know that, you know, being able to, I call myself a sound therapist, right? Being able to give somebody a mix is valuable, right? And unfortunately, I hope we don't have to have a pandemic to realize that. But that's kind of the artists, the cross they have to bear is understanding that there's value and importance in what they're doing. But go back to your question.
So my question is, for anyone who's thinking about, and I will tell you, when I went to college, my parents on the opposite side said, "You're paying for college, do whatever you want," right? So I just said, well, I went in as a theater major. Didn't like that. Didn't like sleeping at the theater. I didn't like building sets, and I didn't like doing any of that stuff. I just wanted to sing, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that's what I wanted, right? I didn't realize theater wasn't.
You're up here burying the lead. You out here
Well-
with a voice of gold. And I don't know about this.
Oh man, it's been a lot of years of struggle. But I didn't realize that theater wasn't musical theater because I had only just done musical theater, right? So I went into college thinking I would do musical theater, and they don't do musical theater at all. Like we're doing, Reformation plays, and we're doing Shakespeare, and we're doing Neil Simon and all this stuff, but no musical theater until the summertime. And so I switched my major to music. My parents were always supportive of whatever it is. My dad always told me that it doesn't matter, as long as you're happy, it doesn't matter what you're doing.
Oh gosh, I wish your dad would have talked to my dad.
Well, but I'll tell you what happened. What happened was I didn't have probably your talent and charisma and all those things, and I gave up. I gave up a year or so into it because I realized I didn't like auditioning. So I went out for I went out for the Carowinds show. The Carowinds show. I auditioned for the Carowinds show.
Okay.
And made it through 3 rounds or something like that. Got down to the dancing part, and even though I had been a pretty big hit at the middle school dance, I did not follow the steps. And the dancer there was like 5, 6, 7, 8, this, that, and everybody was like, "Nope, I'm lost. Do it again." And I just got left behind. But I realized that over that summer of auditioning for several things that I just didn't want to audition for a living. And so I, at the same time, got a job doing computers very randomly with another company and got into IT and ended up getting my degree in computer science. But I gave up on a creative career because I was like, this is going to be too hard. I don't have the guts to get through this. And I probably also didn't have the talent and all the other stuff. And, I think it takes a big combination of things to really do well at it for a career, So talk about creative careers and talk about the idea of like, okay, how do I not do some boring, mundane thing just to make money? How do I follow my dreams and actually make it work?
You know, somebody said this recently, and I thought this was really interesting, was that they said, you know, going after your dreams is one thing, but you should go after your opportunities, right? And maybe there's something to that to a certain extent. And I have to dispel this notion that people have, because I did another interview recently, and there's this misconception that people are artists because they don't want to do real work or they're lazy, whatever. And I'm telling you, no one works harder. We just talk about the DJing shit. Nobody works harder than somebody that has to like pack their fucking car up, drive to these like, you know, bumblefuck towns and pull their stuff out, get yelled at by people for hours at a time. You know what I'm saying? And you know, you don't have normal hours. It's really a solo situation where you don't have friends that can ride with you and stuff like that. Or in situations that I would have, I remember when I brought Fife from A Tribe Called Quest here, rest in peace to Fife, and I did this whole this event called Colacon at the museum. Fantastic, great event. And when the show was done, there was this after party that was at the Wig. And everybody was going to the Wig. And I was getting ready to go. And my friend says to me, "Where you going?" What happened was I needed a stage for that show. And my friend had access to this company. They gave me a free stage, which saved me about $1,500 under the caveat that I had to help them break this thing down for the next day. So I'm like taking my jacket off and I'm breaking the stage down.
Sure.
And I never felt more lonely than this. My brother calls me. He's like, "Where you at?" I said, "I'm still at the museum breaking the stage down." He told me, "You straight?" I was like, "Nah." He was like, "All right, man, I'll talk to you later." Right? Because he was hanging with the celebrities that I brought in town. I brought Ghostface and Fife and Charlie. Of course he wants to hang out with them, right?
Of course.
But I'm like, well, shit, I'm the one that provided this joy for you. I'm the one here by myself. Not by myself, but like I'm breaking this stuff down. And so
this is not a good sales pitch, by the way.
well,
okay.
I think this is necessary. I think, you know, especially making hip hop music. Hip hop is one of those genres where people have a total misconception for it, where you know, guys will date a girl and they're like, "Yeah, I gotta go to the studio, baby. I don't want you here." And they're like, "Oh, you don't want me there because you're gonna have all these bitches in the studio." And the reality is, when I was working on my first album, we had a song, we worked on a snare for 12 hours. Mm-hmm. That's porn to me, right?
Yeah.
But for anybody else that's not into it, they would absolutely hate it, right? So I would say this. I would say it's all about what your motivation is behind it. If I joke all the time and say I do art as my get rich slow scheme. Like I'm never doing anything to become a millionaire with this stuff. I would love to, but I create for the sake of something that I feel like I have to do. Like I operate under the ethos of somebody named Gordon Parks that I absolutely admire. And Gordon Parks was a photographer. He was the first black photographer for Vogue magazine, Life magazine, all these pictures you see in the civil rights movement. He did this. He wrote a book called The Learning Tree. That's in the Library of Congress as well, one of the greatest books of all time. He's the first black film director to get a major budget. He wrote symphonies, all this type of stuff. He was one of those people where it's like, oh, he's a professional artist. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how my approach has been to it, where it's just like, I just have this desire to do these creative things and find these creative outlets for it.
Yeah.
And so you learn how to figure that stuff out. But
I think too, it comes down to, for what I'm hearing you say, is it comes down to the idea that you've got to just understand what your goal is, right? And your goal is not to. It's a hard thing to do too. Your goal is not to necessarily please your parents. Mm-hmm. The goal is not necessarily to impress your friends.
Oh yeah. You know, like, hey, mom, dad, I'm gonna drop out of school to do hip hop music.
Yeah. If you're happy,
they're not gonna. Yeah, they're not gonna say that, right?
Yeah.
So, but also, I think that that's a real situation where you have to figure out what makes you happy. And I think, to be honest with you, this is all new for everybody. Mm-hmm. Meaning, I remember this comedian that had this conversation on something. He was talking about the way he grew up, mm-hmm. where he was just like, his grandfather was kind of a piece of shit, right?
Okay.
And he said something to the extent of, you have to understand being a good husband is kind of a fairly new concept.
Right.
Right.
Well, I was about to say most people's grandfather through a certain period was a pretty bad dude.
Yeah.
My grandfather was a bad dude.
Yeah.
Right.
And my grandfather was the little I knew about him, the bar was so low that it was just like, my grandma's like, well, he don't beat me. but everything else he was terrible at, right?
Right.
Because the bar was so low was basically, roof over my head and food on the table, barely. All right, that's it. Right. And
because of that, my dad was a great dad and a great grandfather to my kids.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the same thing about,
and a great man and a great example. Right.
And that's kind of what I'm saying about the artist thing, right?
Yeah.
Is that the idea of a good husband is a new thing. And so when I'm dealing with stuff with my therapist, talking about my parents, I had to understand the generation previous to them was absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And this hit me one time when I wrote about this. I thought about my parents and I was just like, you know what? I never knew whether or not my parents enjoyed their job.
Right.
Right.
Never talked about it.
Never talked about it. It was just something that they were supposed to do.
Right.
So the idea of I'm having a career that makes me happy, that's foreign to them. And so now I'm the generation that's like, hey, this isn't fulfilling to me. I'm going to find something else. So in a weird way, it's a revolutionary thing that I might think that they pushed back when I was younger. But my parents admire that shit now, right? So it's like, Kamala just got this nod, and I got a picture of Kamala that I'm posting on Instagram. My parents are excited about that. Yeah, Derek was hanging out with she about to be the president. You know what I mean?
I saw that. I saw that. That's good.
But that was from a creative thing too,
Yeah.
where I would have been in that opportunity if it, I was in a roundtable interview at a barbershop,
Yeah.
plugged in to have a conversation with her, So I say that to say, whatever you decide to do creatively, you have to do, I would say 3 things. I would say find someone that's doing the craft that you are interested in and try to get yourself a mentor.
Yeah.
Right? Like DJing has been easier because like back in the day, if a young kid comes up to me and say, yo, or if a kid come to me now, hey, Preach, I hear you talking about not wanting to carry your speakers into the venue. I'll bring your speakers into the venue. Word? Come on, little homie.
Yep.
I'll give you all the game you want to know.
Yep.
Right? Find someone that's a mentor, and to be a mentor, to get somebody to be a mentor, you have to provide something for them that they don't want to do. So find a mentor. The second thing I would say, study the greats. Right. So maybe if you want to get into filming, maybe you need to watch Citizen Kane for just suffer through it if you need to.
You
right?
have to have it in your library. You have to know it. Yeah.
And number 3, find your tribe. I think what ends up happening is that people are always looking for opportunities from people that are above them.
Yeah.
When there's a lot of people that are around you that you guys can be peers.
Right.
And work together and learn together, right? Like when I first started playing chess, everybody wants to get the grandmaster to show them what the fuck to do. Whereas theoretically, the best way to learn how to play chess, find somebody that's on your level,
right,
and y'all grow together,
right?
I think that's the approach artistically as well. And I think that if you find your tribe, get an understanding of someone doing something better than you, and be under them, and also have an idea of what's your art, what are you trying to do with it. I think you put those things together, something to come out of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll tell you that I look at what we do as a craft, right? I don't look at what we do as art, right? Because we're making. So
what's your distinction between craft and art? Is craft something that's functional, and art is something to be?
No, it's the intention of the artist, right? So this is what we learned from, Michel Duchamp, right? We put a toilet in an art gallery and call it art, then it becomes art, right? And so I think that my musical pursuits right now, I'm playing with other people who have come up with ideas and I'm fitting into their band, right? Which is fine. So those are definitely could be art because we're doing it for no other purpose than we just love doing it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think once something attains a purpose outside of the intention of the artist. So once if you're an artist, you're saying, I'm making this for me. I'm glad other people enjoy it. I'll be happy to sell it. I'm glad you get use out of it. I'm glad you interpret it differently than I interpret it, all of those things. But the intention for it, from my perspective, is for me, for art's sake. Right.
Okay.
And so if I'm making something for you, if you come to me and commission a thing, then you commissioning a thing turns that thing into a craft.
I got you.
So I guess it's a distinction from thinking about it that way.
If I make a painting that I enjoy and it ends up in a gallery, that's me being an artist. But if you hire me to do something for your home, that's me,
Well, it depends. So for instance, if I hire you to make something for my house, and I just say, do what you want, I love your style, that's fine. That's art. That's and I don't think there's a good or bad distinction. I just think it's a distinction of if like I said, if I'm making a beautiful cabinet, right, that there's artistry in it, there's creativity in it. But
you mentioned cabinets twice. Do you actually build fucking
I
cabinets?
I don't. But
I got excited, man.
But I love I love the idea of being a cabinet maker, right? Yeah. And thinking about myself more like a cabinet maker than a sculptor or a painter.
I'm gonna tell you a random story about that's kind of similar about like the artist and the craft thing. So when we're talking about my parents and their parents and the whole thing about, my father is a great father, but I also would say that societally, what I was saying before is that my dad really didn't communicate with us as kids back in the day. And I used to get really frustrated about it, but I'm like, oh, he didn't know what to do.
The example wasn't there.
Well, to him, he was killing it because his dad wasn't there at all.
Right.
So he's like, damn, I'm taking care of these little munchkins. I'm batting at 1,000 right now.
Yeah.
So it was like, you got to be a provider, not a communicator.
Right.
Right. So that whole thing was just new to him.
Right.
Whereas like if I have kids now, I'm gonna be a communicator. This
Sure.
and that. Right. So
Absolutely.
And then it's probably gonna be something that my kids gonna be like, yo, dad really fucked me up. Let me not do that anymore.
You're going to do something.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm apologizing. I have no kids.
Nobody
now.
makes it out of childhood without problems.
So here's something that I always remember about my father. When I was 10 years old, my mom was telling my dad, hey, I want a deck in the backyard. My dad said, I don't know how we're going to do that. I don't know if we can do it. My mom said, yeah. She pulls out a little piece of paper. She draws out this little diagram of a deck. And so that next week, every day my dad's picking me up from school, Joseph Kills Elementary. We're going to Lowe's. And my dad's like buying this wood and this and this and that. And then I see this motherfucker who's never been a carpenter, never knew any of this stuff. My father builds a deck for my mom.
Sure.
And it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life.
Sure.
Right? Blew my mind.
Yeah.
As I got older, though, I got annoyed.
Yeah.
Because my father and I had rare opportunities for us to bond. And there was never a moment my dad was like, hey, son, come over here. Let me show you how to cut this. Let me do that, blah, blah, blah. And that was a perfect opportunity. And as I got older as an adult, I'm talking to my mom about it. I said, you know what? Why didn't dad take this as an opportunity to bring me in? My mom said this to me. She says, baby, because your daddy wanted to say to me, honey, I did this all by myself.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but I say that to say when you're talking about building the cabinets, like that's the thing that I think about. I was so fascinated by that, where someone can take something with their hands, build something that's functional, that's useful. Yeah. That's why I kind of think of it. It might be a craft, but there's like a little bit of artistry.
There's artistry. I think it's funny. So that story is funny because your dad and my dad are probably similar generation, and my dad wanted a closet off of their bedroom. It wasn't there, didn't exist. So he built a closet, right? Never built a closet before.
Yep.
Made mistakes, right? Got the wrong whatever, wasn't treated, whatever it was. Took him 6 months, but he built it himself. He wasn't gonna let this closet get the best of him, right? And so I think it's funny, as those generations go along, his dad was the same way. He was never home. When he was home, he was beating the kids and the mom, and not a good guy. My dad, was always there, right? Again, very similar, quiet in ways, talked in ways, but so my dad and just to assuage your regret on that, I had a lot of opportunities for my dad to show me stuff. It was very frustrating for him that I didn't do it the way he wanted me to do it.
I was about to say,
yeah.
While you were saying that, I was like, maybe that was a little of God's grace, because there's been once in a blue moon back in the day if my dad was working on something in the car.
Yeah.
Give me the Phillips head.
Oh yeah.
Damn it, boy. That's you know what I mean.
Oh God. Or I'd hand him a socket and he'd go, "This is English."
Yeah.
And I go, well, "Sorry, I don't know the difference." And you know, I say to the young people, like, you've never held a flashlight for your dad, and it shows. You know.
Yo.
because you know you're an idiot. You can't hold the flashlight, right?
Yeah,
Come on.
listen. Oh
you know,
my
and
gosh,
so,
yeah.
but it was with love, right? You could tell it was with love that he would say that. But it's definitely, and I will tell you that as a dad, so my son is 20, almost 21.
You
I have a
grown-ass
daughter that's
kid.
14, that's almost 15, and what they've seen me do is, if there's a plumbing problem in the house, I hire a plumber. If there's a HVAC problem, I hire an HVAC guy. If I have a problem with my car, it goes to the mechanic, right? And I don't know that that's the right way or the wrong way, but my dad would have never given up control of that stuff.
Listen, my father. All right, the angriest my dad got at me, well, like in recent years, probably a year or two ago. Let me backtrack a little bit. There's something about old black men and cutting grass. My father always is cutting his grass. So 2021, my father was diagnosed with prostate cancer, stage 4. A few months later, my mom's diagnosed with breast cancer, right? They're fine now. They're getting on my fucking nerves, but they're fine. But when my dad was diagnosed with prostate cancer, they were going to have to do radiation. They were going to have to do the surgery. This was like a big fucking deal. So he's in the hospital. They're talking to him about all this stuff. They're telling him about the potential risk. And they say, "Do you have any questions?" And the only thing he asked was, "When can I cut my grass again?" Right? All he cares about is his grass.
Yep.
So there was this one time, and I bring this up because this happened again recently. Like about a year or so ago, I come by my parents' house, and there's a thing that's on the kitchen table. It was like yard of the month. So whatever the HOA or whatever,
Wow.
they gave him yard of the month.
It's a big deal.
I took a picture of it,
Yeah.
put it on Facebook. My dad, when he goes to Lowe's, there's people that knows he's my father. They're like, "Oh, you're Preacher's dad or whatever." My dad goes to Lowe's and like, "Yo, Mr. Jacobs, congratulations on yard of the
got
month."
it.
What?
You
What?
did it.
He is so angry. He is so angry at me, right?
That's
He
hilarious.
is so pissed. But when he's angry about it, I say to him, "Dad, I was proud of you." Mm-hmm. Well, I wouldn't want to say that. He kind of calmed down a bit.
Oh, that's
right?
funny.
But yeah, but I say that to say, when I want to get at him, quote him, I want to buy a house next year. And my joke is, to piss him off, I'm just going to hire some kid in the neighborhood to cut my grass. Right?
So I haven't cut grass. So I've been in my current house for 15 years. I have cut grass under a handful of times because there's always a teenager. There's always a teenager.
Yes.
They'll always do it. They used to do it for $20. Now they'll do it for $30.
Yeah.
We got this nice young man who's just gone to college. We had him start doing our grass and stuff when he was probably 15. He's going off to college now. And he's so respectful, does a great job. His dad drives him over and helps him get I mean, you know, not anymore because he's grown, but yeah, it's funny as the generations go along, right? My son, at 20 years old, is trying to figure out how does he become a millionaire by 25, right? Because 25 feels old to him, right? And I'm going, all right, that's cool, you know. And I'm not telling him you're not going to make it. I'm like, let's do that. That's great. Good job. Let's go. You know, let's get out there and get after it. So that's awesome, and I think we could sit here and just talk all day. I think it's every time we've hung out, it's always been that banter.
Well,
you know,
I would say this: the one thing that I think that I'm hearing that's cross generations is that there's an entry point to certain things. So cutting grass isn't important to me, but my dad's relationship with having a yard sounds like something that's similar to a story that my mom told me. So you think that these generations are far, far back, but both of my parents, from Eastover, South Carolina, both of them picked cotton, and they were born in the 50s.
Sure.
Right? And so my father would tell my mom that when he's a little kid, maybe 6 years old, he's picking cotton, and you worked all day, and you probably got 30 cents. And my dad would take 30 cents, give it to his granny. She'll probably give him 3 cents left or whatever. And my dad talked about while they were out there in the blazing sun, they had people coming with one little scoop of water to the people, but they had a guy pushing a Coca-Cola cart with an ice cold Coca-Cola. And if you wanted an ice cold Coca-Cola, they took 5 cents out of your 30 cents. And it upset my father so much. And I bring this up that when I go to my parents' house, it's full of sodas all the time.
Oh, yeah.
All these sodas all the time. And I say to my mom, why the hell does dad have these sodas? And my dad ended up telling her when they were dating about how it used to frustrate him about that Coca-Cola. My dad say to her, you know, when I have kids, they're going to always be able to have a cold Coca-Cola.
Yep.
That type of thing, right?
Yep.
That's my dad in his yard.
Yep.
At some point, it was like, I'm going to have my own yard, right? And I get older, I'm like, the little kid.
Because
like,
wherever you take the pride, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So, yeah, and I think that what kind of what we can do is to take the pride in what we do every day, right? We can take the pride not in what we have, but in what we do,
Absolutely.
right? And so I think that's a very cool thing. Okay, I'm going to end on quick questions.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Because I'm going to cater them to you. We usually do these.
All right.
Favorite hip hop artist of all time.
Jay-Z.
Okay. Favorite sitcom.
Different World.
Okay. Wow, the spinoff.
I'm trying not to think about it. So
No, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, just quick answers. Your favorite season of the year.
Fall.
Nice. Last one is your favorite movie of all time.
Shit. All right. I have to have. All right. You know what? I'm not going to give you subcategories. I'm going to give you the 2 movies.
All right.
I would say the greatest shot cinematography, the greatest film experience I've ever had, film of all time that I've seen, City of God by Fernando Miralles. I've never experienced anything like that when I saw it. Have you ever seen it?
No, I haven't seen that one.
City of God is the greatest film I've ever seen.
Okay.
I'm telling you, from how it was shot, how it was done, the cinematography, the way the story was told, it is the greatest film I've ever seen in my life. I saw it in a movie theater by myself and was shaking. So, quick story behind it. It came out, I think, in 2002. I'll be fast. It came out in 2002. It takes place in Rio de Janeiro. The movie is in Portuguese, and they submitted it to the Oscars. It was ignored. Later on, Quentin Tarantino sees it. He loses his shit. He convinces Miramax to re-release it in 2004, and it was nominated for Best Director and Best Foreign Film. But greatest film I've ever seen, whatever.
All right, I'll look it up.
The movie that probably will represent me more than anything else, Do the Right Thing, Spike Lee.
Nice.
Yeah. So when I first saw Fight the Power video by Spike, there's something about that just took over me.
Daggum, we're never going to stop talking. I'm going to tell you that my introduction beyond Run DMC, which I look at Run DMC at the time that I found them, as pop music.
Okay.
I don't look at it as hip hop music. I look at it as pop music. Because all my friends loved Run DMC. Run DMC, Beastie Boys all happened about the same time, and we all got into it. My introduction to hip hop was Public Enemy. And I got into Public Enemy because Public Enemy did a collaboration with Anthrax. And I was a fan of Anthrax, right? Metal was kind of where I came up.
Bring the noise.
Yep. And so, but Public Enemy had the same feel as Metal had, right? Chuck was pissed. Everybody, Terminator X was like, it was all that, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I get this, right? I did not get most of it at the time, and I got that. I was like, this is something I can identify with. And so I think a lot of the hip hop that I listened to later, all of the, that sort of led, Public Enemy kind of led to Cypress Hill and Tupac and the other stuff that would eventually be stuff that I listened to. Down to like Diggable Planets and Tribe Called Quest and Wu-Tang and all of that came from Public Enemy for me. So I feel that, and I love how Bring the Noise especially. But then, Fight the Power, all of those things became popular enough that I found them on MTV, after that. And so
and that was a weird intersection because, the big complaint about hip hop fans like me have is that we hear a lot of artists saying that they can't be conscious in the music they make and be successful. And these early hip hop artists, it was like, yo, these guys are saying a lot of shit and selling out stadiums.
There was no one more popular than NWA when NWA
Absolutely.
came out.
Yeah. So it's like, for that notion that you can't say something and be successful, I think it's just insane.
But also because teenagers weren't allowed to buy it. So I remember
that was a part of it. Yeah.
The NWA tape that I got was a bootleg that I bought from the gas station around the corner from my house in a little case with black and white photocopied cover on it.
Love it.
Paid $5 for it. That's how I got to listen to NWA.
Well, that was the thing that Tipper Gore, Al Gore's wife, when they had this huge pushback on the parental advisory stuff, and how Luke Campbell is really kind of like a hero when it comes to freedom of speech in America, is that they were trying to stop the sale of hip hop music by putting the parental advisory sticker on it. But what it did instead was, if a tape didn't have the sticker, the kids didn't want it. Right?
Yeah.
So
I bought Two Live Crew from the same right, thing. And if my parents had known that I had that Two Live Crew tape, I would have had my butt beat. Yeah. Because it was not good. And every time my wife complains about music nowadays, I'm like, honey,
the stuff
remember Two Live Crew?
Yeah, the stuff I should
because come on,
I should not have been listening to that. Which, on a final note, I'm gonna tell you, I met Luther Campbell.
Okay,
he signed my record.
Nice.
You know where I met him?
Where?
When I met Kamala Harris. He was campaigning for it. And I was just like, if this is not a full circle moment.
Now, I will say that I haven't listened to Two Live Crew since I was in high school. I can't imagine the music is that good.
It doesn't age very well. But like, again, it's like the strip club music
context,
thing.
Right?
Yeah. It's like Ice Ice Baby to me now. If I play it in a room of people that were alive enough to hear
they're
it,
like, oh!
it's a little bit of a nostalgia, but you're not listening to it on your way to work.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not diving into the lyrics wondering what it means, right?
Absolutely.
This is not the Beatles.
Yeah. Me so honey. It means what it means. Right?
That's exactly what it is.
There's no hidden.
I heard that. I think I heard that sample before I watched Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know where the sample.
As soon as you saw it,
I was like, oh god, that's Two Live Crew.
Yeah. My quote is not Alabama Black Snake, not Tubuku. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna end right there.
We're so old.
We're gonna end right there. Preach, thank you so much for coming on, man. I appreciate that. That's really cool. And we'll flip. I'll come on your podcast. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Cut.
All right.
I want to get your picture.
Yeah, I was gonna say.